Hello to this video is called I See We Have a Different Cast this morning. These were the introduction words from the lead commissioner yesterday, November 7, on day 18 of the public inquiry to federal government for invoking the Emergency Act on February 2022. Today is November 8, 2022. I didn't do a video yesterday because I have been trying to understand if I feel the same level of commitment to doing this daily, listening to the very lengthy sessions of this inquiry and then putting together the video, then also loading it. It takes a lot of time out of my day, and everybody knows I have a full-time job, so it's becoming increasingly difficult to do these two things at the same time. And the reality is that a lot of the words that were used today, including the very first words in the morning at 9:30 yesterday, made me believe that I'm not really watching something that is looking for the truth. Perhaps it's a set of things that I will explain later in my video. The agenda for today's overview, questioning everything, today's witnesses, and my point of view. We're looking into the testimonies in the inquiry, trying to understand in theory if there were valid reasons to invoke the Emergency Act, and also we're in theory trying to understand if the powers used by the federal government were exceeding the scope granted by the Act. And we are going to be seeing our recommendation in English and French, February 2023, based on the findings. But as we know, this is not a trial, this is an inquiry, and all my videos are available on YouTube, Lisa Prus Research, as well as my own website, lisaprusresearch.com. If you want to see today's inquiry live, here is the link, and also there is a file of the previous days as well. So I was saying that I'm going to question everything, and the reason why I'm questioning everything is not only because there were so many parties interacting on the ground that led to confusion, both from the police perspective and the government perspective and the convoy perspective, that it's really hard to understand how could anything could have been solved in a positive manner, except if the government, and by the government I mean the federal government, would have sat down and tried to understand what was the reason and what could have been solved. And I'll talk about more details in a minute. In today's inquiry, we're going to talk about the Windsor Police Service. And yes, you're seeing this is the uniform of the Windsor Police Service. So when you see these and more visuals that are very disturbing that I'm going to show you today, you will understand that very likely this police officer is not unbiased anymore. I thought the police officers were supposed to treat us all the same, and based on this, if I see a person with this, I say, you are not going to defend me impartially, because I am personally straight. I am not LGBTXYZ. I'm not any of that. So does that mean you're not impartial anymore? So very disturbing, and you're going to see more disturbing things in a minute. Here we can see that the multiple locations include Ottawa, and you're going to see here all the locations we have been seeing in the past days. And here is the recap, a little bit of what we know. There were so many faces and quote leaders on this Ottawa convoy that obviously created a confusion internally between them, a little bit of an ego-power struggle between them as well. And from the government as well, it's going to be very tough to understand who should I talk to try to come together to an agreement. So it just didn't help this amount of people. Today's focus was Windsor. Here you can see on the left a big picture visual of the area, and you can see here the 401, that is the interprovincial highway. And here you're going to see a close-up of where the bridge is. Here's the US and here's Canada, and you can see how the University of Windsor is actually after the Canada Border Services Agency. So it's very interesting because here you're going to see a mix of spaces that are the border, but also you have a lot of grocery stores, schools, and even the big University of Windsor in the same area. This is a visual of the blockade, and here you have another focus of the inquiry, and it will be later in the following days, that is Coutts. And Coutts was obviously very important because you're going to see almost an overlap with Ottawa. And at the end of it, it was solved without any type of violent intervention. It was just simply a conversation, like the way everything should have been solved. 11 people in total were arrested with some weapons, but according to the official sources of the police officers as well as the organizers, these guns and these people are not related and were not related to the convoy itself. However, here you can see the police are exploring charges or avenues related to organized crime or anti-terrorism laws. So the reason why this is being explored is because it needs to be proven that this convoy was associated with something that would require the invocation of the Emergency Act. But you can see here in writing that is post. You're trying to create this story after. Here you can see every single one of these witnesses have contradicted themselves in Ottawa regarding emergency lanes, but here, because it's such an open space in Coutts, we can see how this is after everybody had left, and here you can see even in the middle of the so-called blockade, you see space, enough space for the emergency lanes. So you can see how it doesn't matter what they say, the pictures are showing that there was always an emergency lane open. Here you can see a timeline and day one of Ottawa and Coutts that took place simultaneously on the 29th of January. And then here's when the act is invoked. Here is when Windsor blockade started. The Windsor reopened on the 13th. And then here you can see when Coutts reopened, but again, in a very peaceful manner. Only Ottawa had these awful images of horses and very violent arrests. And on the 21st is when officially everybody was, or most of people were gone, and the act was revoked on the 23rd, Wednesday. So here you can see the overlapping of certain things, but if this Ambassador Bridge was open without the Emergency Act, and this was reopened, in my opinion, without the Emergency Act, because it was a peaceful protest, obviously there was, again, no need to go to these extremes, but that's exactly what the inquiry very likely will say. Now, let's go back to the focus of this inquiry, because the reality is that the following four things should be considered in order for you to be able to invoke it: the espionage, foreign activities, the threat of use of violence for ideological, political, or religious reasons, and or violence against property to achieve political objectives or overthrow the Canadian government. We have seen through the multiple witnesses in Ottawa that that's not the case. There was no proof of espionage, and I'm talking about the police officers, no foreign activities, and obviously they're trying to build consistently a case regarding the violence and the political objectives, but clearly that is not the case. These witnesses and the questions feels to me like the government is gathering intelligence to try to understand the structure of the convoy, but we can see there was no communication between them. We hear them over and over ratifying the same thing. Gathering evidence against the witnesses, because we know that all the witnesses, particularly from the convoy perspective, have open cases and court dates that are in the future. So all these things without a defense lawyer on the stand of the inquiry is actually very concerning to me. I feel that they're also mocking them and inflicting pain to them and to us. I do care about freedom. I do care about the intent. I went to the different protests in different places here in Quebec, and also I went to Ottawa. So to me, it's not a positive thing to watch these people in pain. I really believe, perhaps not all of them, but most of them wanted freedom for all of us. And freedom is have my bodily autonomy, which I retain and I will always retain and defend. So to me, it's difficult to watch these things. Also could be a way of demoralizing them and others. And most importantly, more and more, I feel that this is to set an example for anyone else not to keep on fighting for freedom, which I personally think it's not the right reason to do this inquiry. Today we had the first witness, the Mayor of Windsor, and indirect examination by the Commission Councillor. They were trying to show the impact on the blockade, and then you can see here the specific of where the blockade took place, and the importance of the bridge that we already heard in the very first days of the inquiry, between $300 to $450 million in commerce per day, because it's connecting, as we know, the US with Canada. Then we heard him saying of every fort that there was a blocked area, and he swore on the Bible. So under oath, he's texting and showing text here on the right, disclosing that this was a block. But we know that even on February 7, by this email that was shown in evidence, that there was still, at the very least, one lane open. So you can see a contradiction. So when there is this type of contradiction, I start to not feel that the person is telling the truth, and then the government called for 100 officers based on the chief of police estimate, and then these were the words of the major. He literally said, open quotes, "How could we tell this story?" close quote. And to me, the fact that he's not being accurate under oath, he's talking about a story, and the lead commissioner is talking about a cast. At that point in time, it was maybe 10:30. I thought, what am I watching? This is not about clarifying what happened. This is about just literally building a story with actors, and I'm not impressed with that. So that's the reason why I didn't do a video yesterday. I was trying to understand, do I really believe what is happening, or is this something else that maybe is not worth my time and energy? And here you can see another thing that came out yesterday, and is that the Premier of Ontario, Ford, doesn't have to be witness in the Emergency Act inquiry just because he was granted parliamentary privilege. Well, if the most important, quote, actor, I'm using their words, is not going to be present, he is the Premier that had he could oversee Windsor, Ottawa. He is the central point. So if he's not there, are we really looking for the truth? If you're hiding the Premier, what is this inquiry about? It's not about the truth anymore, to me. Then the second witness was the police superintendent at the time. And obviously, here you can see that the answers are inaccurate at best, if not purposely trying to hide things. Question, was the person from the commission councillor, was the person who started the slow roll also involved in the blocking bridge? I'm not sure. I don't think so, but I'm not sure. First of all, what kind of answer is that? He's a police officer. He should be accurate. Well, clearly, even under oath, is not necessary. When was the Windsor police blocking the bridge? I don't have a clue. These were his answers today. Again, I don't know what I'm watching, but I'm definitely not even watching an inquiry. I don't know what it is. Then, this same person has a campaign to raise awareness for sexual violence against women, and I don't know how many straight police officers would be inclined to wear high heels that are red, but I think that at least some of them were not inclined to do that. So why are male officers wearing female shoes? What is the message? And for those of you who have not done research about what the red shoes mean and the association with these, that I can't say this word because I'll be pulled, and also these that I won't say so I don't get pulled. So if you haven't done some research, you should do some research. All these elements that I'm seeing are very disturbing to me. I don't know why this is even something that is being part of the police force. Then we had the second part of the commission councillor was a gentleman who was extremely young. He couldn't even read properly. He couldn't even pronounce words properly. He would say February 10th, and it was the 10th. So I have an accent. I don't speak properly, but I'm not a lawyer. So obviously, it was very odd to hear that in such an important inquiry, you are allowing a person who obviously could present issues in the contradictions. And these were the words of the second witness. I think we charged 44 people. I think that is the number. I honestly have lost all faith in this accuracy. This is not accurate. My point of view, 0 to both. I don't believe a word they say, and what they're saying is completely inaccurate. So this is the way I see it. What the government is failing to understand is that all could have been managed very properly in the Canadian way, by talking, by agreeing what to do next, instead of creating all this chaos, all this violence, and particularly against people who were clearly exercising the right for protesting in a peaceful and lawful manner. The different protests and blockages were not coordinated, and at a certain point in time, people have nothing to lose. A lot of these truckers we heard of, they had nothing to go back to. So obviously, we have heard from other witnesses as well that there are people who feel the duty, not even the inclination, but the duty to express the need for freedom. And some of us, and that includes myself, I don't enjoy being a slave. I don't enjoy being told what to do. I don't enjoy being told that I should put something in my body against my consent. I don't agree with that. So what we are failing to understand is that this inquiry is more dangerous than a trial because these witnesses don't have a defense lawyer. So every time questions are being asked that could be used in a court of law later against them, will be used against them without any proper process here. And then the final thing that I know everybody who's listening to me knows is that this government is not for the people. With the aggressive tone and language, all that is seeking is to divide us, to facilitate the way they control us. Is this what a typical Canadian would say, feel, or think? When I swore to become Canadian in 2004, one of the most memorable moments is when I swore that I would never exercise any type of discrimination. Everything was positive when I became Canadian. All the phrases were in positive, except that one that was said very clearly, I will not do any type of discrimination. And here we have, these words are so out of line and include so much discrimination that if I read them for you, I will be banned from this channel. But this entity that is supposed to represent all Canadians can say them, do say them, and we should be okay with that. Why? You can stop the screen and read them, but everybody knows this is very difficult for certain people that believes in freedom. Thank you very much for listening.